We rolling?
Okay. Why do people think Virtua Fighter is hard? Or alternatively, why does it have a reputation for being hard compared to other fighting games?
So I haven't played enough Virtua Fighter to report back authentically with why the game is actually hard. But I can tell you where the reputation came from, at least around VF4, like the old days. So if you saw my last Virtua Fighter video, VF4 got a big PlayStation Greatest Hits release for $20, and that was kind of what got a bunch of people in the fighting game community back then to check it out. The reputation for it being hard, I remember even then, it came from, one, knowing that the characters have really big movesets, right? Much like Tekken. Characters have very big movesets. There's a lot of frame data that you have to learn, and that the game is known for being very interactive, right? It's about your decisions and their decisions. It's less about, hey, did you hit this thing at the exact right moment or whatever. Again, because I haven't played that much Virtua Fighter, I can't really tell you how, like, the exact nuances in which this game differs from, like, the 2D fighters that I know really well. But the way it's been explained to me is essentially that it's a lot of rock, paper, scissors, and rock, paper, scissors is decision interactions, right? I choose this, you choose this, X beats Y, so I win that interaction, but now you have information as to what I'm choosing, and maybe the next time we run that interaction, you choose the thing that beats my X, whatever. It's funny because when I describe this now, and it's like, oh, it's a fighting game, ding, with a lot of frame data, ding, and rock, paper, scissors interactions, ding, and a lot of moves that you need to learn, ding. It just sounds like any modern fighting game. And it's funny because this reputation, I remember coming from, again, this would have been like early aughts, right? Like I think I got my copy of VF4 Evo Greatest Hits in like 2003. The way we learned fighting games back then, I played CVS2 for years. Now, I didn't know any frame data. I didn't really need to. That wasn't the layer in which you're playing the game. And the game itself is not that driven by frame data interactions. I played Guilty Gear for a long time, and I didn't really need to know that much frame data. We also didn't have it because it's not in game. At best, we could find frame data from like the Japanese Bibles that release that would have basically printed books. Actually, hold on, let me grab one. Here it is. This right here is the Capcom vs. SNK 2 Millionaire Fighter 2001 official guidebook. We have prints, we have all kinds of screenshots, we have frame data, all this kind of stuff. It's all in Japanese. None of us had this shit back in the day. So there's no way that we were learning any of this resolution of detail. So Virtua Fighter, I remember it had a really good training mode and all these tools so you could learn that kind of stuff, which meant that you were expected to learn that kind of stuff. And the way we learned fighting games back then is not like, oh, let me pick a main and watch a bunch of footage, because we didn't have a bunch of footage, right? There was no YouTube back then. At best, you had Evo DVDs or something if you're in the US. Maybe if you had a hookup for some Japanese footage, hey, that's great if you got it. We didn't have a whole bunch of videos to watch, and we didn't have a whole bunch of stuff to study. And what we did instead was you would look at whatever the easy, like top tier, cheap, powerful stuff was, and you just do it. And that would be how you learn the game. And then eventually you broaden out from there, right? Because we're learning these games in arcades. And in arcades, it's expensive to pick a mid-tier character that you really like and just play them until you get good. You have to spend a lot of time waiting in line, and you have to spend a lot of money, and you're not playing the game as much if you're losing because there's a line. So the way we learn how to play these games is, just learn the cheap, overpowered, top-tier bullshit and do it, and then eventually you'll pick up the rest of the game over time. So when I learned Marvel 2, for example, I didn't start with Spider-Man, Mega Man. No, I played fucking Cable, Storm, Cyclops because my friend told me, just jump back, call Cyclops, do Air Hyper Viper Beam, and kill their assist. And eventually you'll learn how to do Air Hyper Viper Beam 3 times to kill assist once, or maybe you'll learn Magneto or Storm or something like that. But the way we learned those games was like, focus on the top tier bullshit that will get you to start farming scrubs in the arcade. And then once you build comfort with the game, once you're invested, that's when you actually sit down to like learn the game properly, whatever that means. And Virtua Fighter was not a game that we could do that with. One, because it wasn't in most arcades. Like Virtua Fighter 4, actually I don't think 3 really got much of an arcade release in the US. At least whenever I went to fighting game arcades back then, I did not see Virtua Fighter. If I did, maybe it was like an old VF2 cabinet or something. But Virtua Fighter kind of didn't have a strong enough arcade base that I could just walk into an arcade and see people playing Virtua Fighter. It didn't have, like, there wasn't a whole bunch of match footage to study. I think there might have been some like clips or replays or something on the VF4 Evo release, which is pretty cool. It wasn't easy to see how to play the game, which meant that you actually had to just sit down and learn it, right? Learn it by playing with other people. And the tricky thing about that is when a game is predominantly testing decision interactions, right? RPS, and you don't know that much about the game, I don't know what decisions I'm making or how they're supposed to interact with your decisions. In Virtua Fighter, throws will just lose to attacks. If I'm in an attack at all, even if I'm in the startup, a throw will just whiff and the thrower gets punished. If I'm just playing the game and I don't understand that that's a rule, I might be really confused when I see my attacks, when I see the opponent throw and I go for an attack or vice versa, because that's not how I expect fighting games to work. So when you have a game that is predominantly about understanding attack interactions and decision interactions, and neither player really knows what the heck they're doing, it just starts to feel a little muddy. That like I'll be doing a thing and you'll be doing a thing and we'll kind of figure out what's happening or what's not happening, but if neither of us are really sure how to play the game and we don't have more experienced players around to tell us or show us what's going on, then you have to kind of figure it out yourself, and that's not very easy. From my perspective, VF was hard to learn. It got its reputation for being hard to learn back then because it didn't have the same kind of like easy top tier bullshit. Now, fighting games have gameplay hooks, right? Like you learn Street Fighter 6 and you're not just learning your character, you're learning the drive system. And the neat thing about the drive system is that if you know how to use the drive system, you have half screen armored attack that gives you a sweet combo, right? Drive impact. And you have drive rush, which lets you just cancel whatever or dash up into the opponent's face. Games these days are pretty focused on having these like learnable hooks and mechanics to give you something to sink your teeth into early so that you can learn the rest of the character stuff at your own pace. And Virtua Fighter, again, in my experience, has emphasized that kind of combat design a little bit less. It's never really had it. It expects you to learn how everything works. And then once you get competent enough with the game, then it's like really fun. But getting there could be kind of a muddy or messy process, especially if you're not surrounded by other Virtua Fighter players. When I've seen arcades full of Virtua Fighter, I saw people talking to each other and people, playing so many games and getting salty and whatever. Actually, it's funny. Boss, CBS 2 legend and Alpha 3 legend Boss told me once that Virtua Fighter players in the arcade in the old days had the reputation of being the most likely to throw down real hands at an arcade. So maybe there's something there about how realistic the Virtua Fighter combat is such that it attracted the people who wanted to swing on you. Yeah, my experience was that the learning curve and learning patterns for Virtua Fighter probably, like, we considered them harder back then because you had to actually learn how to play the game. But these days, I feel like it's probably still on the higher complexity and higher learning curve side. But motherfuckers learn Tekken. Tekken is also hard, right? You learn Tekken by learning a couple moves and playing the game and then doing that over and over and over and over and over and over and over until you know basically everything. That is tough. And I don't think these days, who knows what the new Virtua Fighter is going to be like, right? But I don't think that Virtua Fighter is dramatically harder than any of the other games we're learning how to play anyway. So if the reputation for learning VF is turning you off, I'd say maybe just sit down and do it. If you're playing fighting games already, again, it's not going to be that foreign to you. The reputation from back in the day, to me at least, really came from the contrast in how you were expected to learn these games versus how we learned games in the arcades, which was really easy and really satisfying by comparison, but also exposed us years later, right? Like now, I sit down and I play games and I realize that I actually didn't know as much as I thought I did about those games. And the newer generation of players playing the old games, because they've got more access to resources and are better equipped to actually study them instead of just farming wins in the arcade, have really shown us that experience ain't shit if you don't eventually back it up with the wisdom and knowledge of proper practice and study. So yeah, great question. Maybe we'll see if VF6 is actually as hard to learn as the others felt, but I really think we've got different folks these days and they're down to do a bunch of different stuff than we did. So, let's see how it goes. Thank you.